into positions of hopelessness and helplessness. The government gives them the drugs, builds bigger prisons, passes a 3-strike law, and then wants us to sing God Bless America. No, no, no. Not God Bless America. God damn America. That's in the Bible for killing innocent people. God damn America for treating us citizens as less than human. God damn America as long as she tries to act like she is God and she is supreme.
I mean, they're all bad.
Yeah, true. It's, it's like history itself. Things haven't gotten worse. They've just gotten clearer, or whatever the fuck the quote is that I'm searching for.
I know 4th of July sucks, but like, what's your barbecue? If you're at a barbecue, like, what's your order? Like, what are you putting on your plate? That's what I want to know, because that's what it comes down to. Is like the food.
Yeah, no, it's a food holiday. It's one of the many that you could do away with all of the weird tradition and just reduce it. Like, Super Bowl is a good food holiday. I don't fuck the game. We should just have the food this year, since there will be no Super Bowl.
Or it could be an eating contest. We could get Kobayashi.
Yeah, where is Kobayashi? I haven't heard about him in a long time. I hope he's okay.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully he doesn't have indigestion problems by now.
Who knows? That's the thing. Anyone could be dead of COVID right now. But to answer your question, 4th of July plate, I'm going to go hot dog. Definitely some of those, like, what do you call them? The beans that come in that weird can, the black can with the guy with his tongue out on it. Ranch-style beans, those are called.
Ranch-style? Is this a Texas thing?
It might be. Now that I'm thinking about it, that might be
a guy with sticking his tongue out.
There's a can of beans you'll see in Texas at every barbecue that's like black, and then like it's got like some yellow lettering, and then there's a guy. He looks almost like the Pringles guy or something. He's got like his tongue sticking out as if to say like and then the can is full of these things called ranch style beans, which come like in their own like sweet kind of sauce. Don't know how to describe it. And maybe some potato salad. What about you guys? What's your plate?
I like shoving the dog into the burger, trying to get him in the same bun as like one contraption.
That's insane, but I love that.
That's pretty fucking weird, man.
Annie, what's your plate?
Yeah, I feel like definitely go for the hot dog. Love just like a really horribly burnt hot dog, like it's been on that grill for hours at this point. Love a potato salad somewhat shamefully. Yeah, I feel like those are my two majors. A bunch of pickles on that hot dog, necessary.
Hell yeah. I do 2 hamburgers, 2 hot dogs. My family usually does pork chop, so I'll do a pork chop.
Ooh.
And then I'll do some barbecue chips and like a soda. That's perfect for me.
Yeah.
Can't forget the chips.
Can't forget the La Croix. Yeah, would love a La Croix today.
By the way, I found it, y'all. I don't know if you can. Oh, I can't.
Yeah, no, that's it.
It's not showing up. Yeah.
Ranch style. It's literally called ranch style beans.
Yeah.
Wow.
Is there a little guy on it, or am I crazy? I might be misremembering.
There is a little guy. Yeah.
All right, well, we solved the mystery. And, wow. I don't believe what's happening to my computer. Fuck this. We're just going to roll without the internet. I have no ability to look things up for this podcast. Hello, everyone. My name's Jake Flores, and I'm having a tech meltdown about my gear that we use to record the podcast. The reason the podcast always sounds like shit, and we're always like, oh my god, my microphone exploded, is because I don't know why. There's a curse on this podcast. They don't want us to make it. It might be the government. They can't stop us. Jake.
We always click DIY format. So it has the capability to sound much better, but it's like an Instagram filter for audio.
True.
We want it to sound more junky than it really is.
True. Yeah. No, this is right. We're doing like lo-fi podcasting, like on vinyl or something. So it sounds, like when people tried to destroy the government in the 70s.
Should I take off my pop filter from my mic? Are we going a little gritty?
Yeah.
Oh, we're going gritty. You know what I'm saying? Like the guy from the internet that everyone hates. Okay. Anders Lee is here.
Anders Lee here.
And joining us are Albert and Annie from NOlympics. Welcome to the show.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for coming on. It's been a long time coming. I think we were supposed to record, and then that was the week that I got thrown in jail, and then every time something like that happens, the podcast has a hiccup for a few weeks. But I'm glad that we're getting back around to this, though, because I think I heard you guys on, I want to say Left Coast or something like that, and I thought, or at least someone talking about this subject, and it really blew my mind, because I had never really thought about the Olympics much, really, or at least as an adult with a somewhat radical mind or something. So please, just lay it down. What should people know about the damn Olympics?
Go ahead, Annie.
It was like we didn't communicate this, how to throw it to each other. So the Olympics are really bad for a lot of reasons. The host cities that have the Olympics pretty much universally get changed forever and not for the better for the people that live in them. We particularly look at a couple different things. Especially the way that the Olympics militarize local police departments, and those police departments never demilitarize. It just ramps that level up and stays there. And there's a lot of examples of that we can go into in Los Angeles and across the world. The Olympics also create a massive amount of real estate development, which causes displacement. We in LA are 8 years away from the Olympics, and we're already seeing the effects of that displacement pretty directly on the city. As a result of that, it increases homelessness. Sweeps of unhoused people in these cities increase pretty dramatically, and their incarceration and criminalization increases. And then, it's really bad for the climate. All of this construction that comes with the Olympics, it creates a ton of corruption in the political governments of the cities that host the Olympics. It's just sort of like a slew of bad shit from top to tail.
Right.
So we're 8 years out from the Olympics in LA, which just seems, I can't even begin to think about what I'm doing in 8 years from now. The idea that we would already displacing people and making so many changes in a huge city for a couple weeks of gaming in 8 years is hard to conceive of. But how does the bidding process work for these cities? How far in advance are people preparing, and what's the process like of getting the Olympics approved in your town?
I think it's interesting because the bidding process, it's something that isn't always like for LA 2028, there wasn't really much publicity around it. And it actually got rubber stamped. Like they did one study, like an LMU did one study of whoever, like a few thousand people that said 88% of Los Angeles residents want the Olympics to come here. So they don't put it on a ballot. There's no public input there. The IOC, the International Olympic Committee, is really not accountable to anyone. So they entice cities with real estate contracts, with bolstering their police forces. So there's not a lot of you can read the bid contracts and see how it all breaks down. But as far as anyone here in LA knows, it was just rubber stamped in a closed session by city council and the mayor. And by Mayor Garcetti, it's been his pet project since he took office. And as soon as he became mayor, he just approved the Olympics without any sort of public input. And so, it's been a tradition for the last maybe 30 years or so that they start planning them, years in advance. And a lot of that is just because of real estate speculation, because of it sort of lets the real estate people figure out which communities they're going to fuck over, basically. I don't know if I can curse on here. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. No.
You're good.
But, it allows them to kind of really, really speculate on what neighborhoods are going to be, where strategically it works for them. They always sell it as this thing of we're going to expand transit and there's going to be more hotels because there's, people talk about this thing of a hotel shortage, quote unquote, which is an insane concept. We don't have enough hotels because we're a town that entices tourists. But it's the IOC and the Olympic bidding process is so shady and so hidden from the public, that if we really knew what the IOC was asking for and what it meant for the host city, I don't think most people, even your most unplugged person in the city, would not want it to come to the city.
Yeah, and to that, I would just add quickly, the polling is super interesting. They basically, every city does multiple polls, like over many months usually during their bid process. Boston did. LA did one single poll. It wasn't by the media. It was, as Albert said, by LMU. And the guy who did the poll, his name's Fernando Guerrera. He was afterwards awarded the contract to do all the like air taxis through Uber for the Olympics. So like those type of conflict of interest are like all over the place. Like the whole infrastructure of it is just like one giant conflict of interest.
Okay, so who are like the real beneficiaries here? You have is it real estate? Is it the sort of the elite tier of the tourism industry? What interests are behind pushing the Olympics in LA, for instance?
I can start on that. So one of the key benefactors is this guy named Casey Wasserman, who is the head of the LA 2028 bid. And he, like a lot of the people who end up profiting from the Olympics, is kind of just like a professional rich kid. You know, he grew up very wealthy. He, I think, Albert, you might know more about this, but I think his grandfather was like a money launderer who he like famously looked up to, that type of thing.
And also, sorry, just to jump in, his grandfather was the one who convinced Ronald Reagan to like get into politics. So we have him to blame for the Reagan years.
Yeah.
So time machine murder, he's the number one target.
For sure.
Pretty much.
100%,
Probably number two.
Yeah.
As far as, but yeah.
Yeah, definitely up there. And also he was on Epstein's plane. So
Wow.
yeah. Yeah, sorry, really buried the lead on that.
Wow.
He's also randomly Megan Rapinoe's like agent, who is the soccer player that was kind of big, had a lot of big headlines a couple years ago. So yeah, he's like kind of, I think it was when Epstein was killed or whatever, like all of his social media like went on lockdown. Like his Twitter is locked. Like he is just trying to hide. He'll show up and do public appearances and stuff to like promote the LA 2028 Olympics, but he's like really cagey and like the guy is just like, you look at him, he looks like a slime ball. And this is the guy that partnered with Eric Garcetti to like try to bring the Olympics here. And it's rotten.
And what has Garcetti's role been in this? Because he's been, I think, pretty early in his mayoralty has been pushing the Olympics. Why is this so far on the top of his agenda? And like, what does he see as the benefit to having the Olympics in LA?
I think, Garcetti, he grew up in LA. His dad was the district attorney during the 90s. He was the one that, bungled the OJ trial. So he comes from a family that has deep roots in LA. And, Garcetti was there for the 84 Olympics. So it's something that, he has nostalgia for, but also like he knows that he can get rich by doing it. I mean, if you look at what's going on in Los Angeles right now, we just had a sitting city council member be arrested for bribery and all sorts of really horrible stuff. So if one of them is corrupt, then you know that a few of others are. And if we're talking about the Olympics in the context of these corruption investigations, you know that like as early as 2017, there was no way that the Olympics, that most of those people, including Garcetti, didn't get some really good deal by either real estate developer or whoever, or even, the Olympics are always used to bolster local police departments. It's always done. And right now with the whole messaging about defunding the police, we know that in like 2 years, the LAPD is going to start pushing for more money in the run up to the Olympics. So, and this is why I personally really love this anti-Olympic movement, because there is so much that goes into it. The Olympics is such a wide-reaching thing. Its tentacles are in every single part of the city, whether you're a housing activist, whether you're into transit or policing. That is what kind of the implications are. And Garcetti knows this. He knows this because that was it's been his pet project. He's been so excited. Initially, it was LA 2024, and then it got pushed to 2028. But that just gives him more time to get more contracts, get more deals, and he'll be long gone. He'll be way out of office by the time 2028 comes, but he's still going to be benefiting from that.
Is he term limited?
Yeah, I think he might be done soon. I'm not exactly sure, but for sure he'll be gone by 2028. Like there's no way that he's gonna still be in office by then.
Well,
Right.
So let's talk a little bit just about the Olympics in general, because I guess it hadn't really occurred to me until I started looking into what you guys were talking about that it just sort of operates as it kind of reminded me of like when they were auctioning off Amazon and there were different cities bidding on it or something like that. Like it creates I don't know, all of these various interests and things that are not in the interest of the people that live in the city. It's just of like the local government and capital and stuff like that. Is this just what the Olympics have always been like? Did the Olympics turn evil at some point? What happened? What are the origins here?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because actually before I got into this work, I, as very ignorant to sports, was like, oh, the Olympics have just been continuous since ancient Greece, which is an insane thing to believe because they were, they did not do that. The modern Olympics were created in the late 19th century by this guy named Baron de Coubertin, who
Nice.
is in, yeah, I mean, you can tell by the name, like, what type of dude this is, right?
He sounds like he fights Sonic the Hedgehog on weekends.
Totally, yeah, he's, like, got a supervillain name for sure. The whole creation of the Olympics is like really predicated on it being a space for elites to spend money, make money, and be able to like witness sport as some kind of like, pastime for the ultra rich. So the International Olympic Committee, the IOC, is just like full of historically and now, like royalty, oligarchs, these type of like global elite.
Henry Kissinger.
Henry Kissinger is a member of the IOC, which means he gets paid more money to just attend the Olympics and watch than the athletes get paid to participate. Just an absolute war criminal that is a part of this institution. So
this is kind of like, when people who look cool get paid to hang out at a nightclub. It's that, but Henry Kissinger at like a swimming competition.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Falling asleep in the stands. There's like pictures of him like dead asleep while something's going on.
Oh my God.
That's so interesting because it makes sense that this is just sort of a social club for, Epstein circle-ish ruling elites and wealthy people that control the world, but it's marketed as, this like wholesome thing for it's sports, but it's for smart people, like it has some sort of project to it that it's enriching the world with its culture or something.
Right.
Yeah, and if I can just add to what Annie was saying, like going back to when the Olympics were first restarted in the late 1800s to, even in the 1932 Olympics were held here in Los Angeles during like a worldwide depression, and like no other city wanted them. And that is actually LA's place in the Olympic legacy, is that we're the place that gets them because no one else will have them. Like even in 1932, there was Olympic resistance. There's people here in LA that were protesting against the Olympics coming here because even then they knew that it was a thing for elites. It was going to cost the city a lot of money, and it was going to change the landscape of the city. I think one of the things that people don't realize, like the palm trees we have here in LA were brought in for the 1932 Olympics. They're not native to LA.
Really?
So they're going to start, they have a lifespan about 100 years. So they're going to start dying in basically if LA 2028 happens, which, it won't because we're here. But if it does, those trees will start dying right around that time. So it'll be a nice little sort of everything coming full circle, the Olympic machine, terrorizing the city once more, and its gifts that it gave us or whatever dying out. I think it's a pretty good little optic in 2028 for that to happen.
One thing, sorry, just to add on to that at the very end. So as Albert was just saying, like the Olympics have been really horrible over time. And one of the things I think like that I like to point to for the origins of this is just in 1904, I think this was like the first Olympics in the United States. And it was like a sideshow for the World's Fair that year in St. Louis. And as part of the Olympics, they had this thing called Anthropology Days, where some like virulent racists dressed up as anthropologists essentially pitted white people against like indigenous people from across the world as some type of like objective measure of like athletic skill. So as you might imagine, like those type of like, you know, racial hierarchies and scientific racism and white supremacy is just like really baked into the fabric of what these games are.
Right, especially at, you know, it was at the 36 Olympics in Berlin, right? That was like held during the Nazi Reich, and you had, you know, that's always looked at in America as being this this great moment of virtue because we sent Jesse Owens over there, but there's always been sort of this kind of eugenic tint in the background of all this stuff. How has it been used throughout the years as sort of like I guess a propaganda mechanism for different nationalities?
Yeah, I think, I mean, this is like a little bit to a different part of your question, but the eugenicist part of it, I think, is able to be used by almost all of these countries universally. Like we see this in the cleaning up of cities, right? Like this idea that before the Olympics, one of the major things that each host city believes it needs to do is make the city look really beautiful for the investors who are going to come and spend money there. And that language of like cleaning up our streets is like, I mean, it's pretty much like genocidal eugenicist language that like city officials here in LA have used. You know, they used it in LA 84 to justify these like massive sweeps, arrests and incarceration of unhoused people in LA. They put, as a result of LA 84, they put laws on the books about criminalizing sleeping on the street, sleeping in on public property, and just like essentially makes being poor against the law. And doing that, you know, is sort of like it creates these refugees from capitalism and then just like puts them in prison. And Los Angeles has like is the largest jailer, I think, in the world at this point. So, you know,
you don't have the shortage of hotels because you have all the tents out there that everyone can just go into. Didn't that happen in like Brazil, or am I getting the country wrong? Somewhere a few years ago in Latin America, the Olympics just what country am I thinking of? There was a country where
you're thinking of a lot of countries. I think that there was a ton of people displaced in Rio in the run up to the Olympics. Like,
that's what
you know, favelas that had been there for so long were just torn down to make room for stadiums. And what people don't realize, like these stadiums that get built, all these things, they don't ever get used again. They're not opening them up for like public or for, you know, sheltering of unhoused people or youth sports, whatever the IOC wants to spin. These things sit empty and are just like a statue to like, you know, the people who used to live there whose lives are now ruined. And we have Donald Trump come here back in February and hold a press conference saying that, you know, he's excited about the LA 2028 Olympics and he was going to send the federal government in here to, you know, clean up the city. So it's always been the same messaging, right? It's always been the same rhetoric over and over, and it always rears its head.
Right. And, you know, homelessness, of course, is an issue all over the country, but especially in California, you have a lot of these cities saying, you know, we would love to really take on this homelessness issue, but we just don't have the money. And you have, you know, as you're describing, sort of displacement happening. And Garcetti, I think, has met with Trump quite a bit. Isn't that right? And the way that they're addressing the homelessness issue is not through public spending or investment. It's through really sort of revanchist tactics. Why there's all this money, though, that is going towards, you know, preparing for the Olympics. How could it be better spent to actually address homelessness?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty wild. Like, I think it's some statistic like it would cost $20 billion to solve homelessness worldwide, but in Olympics costs like $8 to $10 billion. So like if we could just have a couple fewer Olympics, we could have solved a problem that colossal. And in Los Angeles, really specifically, we have a ton of vacant hotels right now, especially as a result of COVID. And Nolympics was part of a movement to demand Mayor Garcetti put unhoused people in those vacant hotel rooms. We're in the middle of a global pandemic. Right. Folks need shelter. And we actually did, with a group called Street Watch, an occupation. We supported an occupation of a hotel room that was led by a unhoused resident named Devon Brown, who basically snuck his way into the Ritz-Carlton in downtown LA.
Nice.
Yeah, it was really cool. He said he was, I think, like a musician who wanted to like scout the rooms. And so they showed him a room and he turned around and was like, I'm homeless. I live in Echo Park, and I'm going to stay in this room until you give me a hotel room to stay in. And obviously, like, because the cops are the cops, he and two other activists got arrested and released, but they still have a court date. But in any case, we've been really trying to push to take all these vacant spaces in this city that are built for people who don't live here, and allow those places to become housing for the people who need it. It's the same thing with there's more vacant housing here than there are unhoused people. And it's just all these giant condos sitting empty for the wealthy to trade in a global market rather than being used for people to live.
Right. It's like the solution to it seems so simple, but the political will just isn't there from people like Garcetti. What are some of the things that he and other mayors are doing instead of actually addressing the homelessness? How have they teamed up with the Trump administration to deal with the issue?
I mean, listen, right now the big fight in LA is around the budget. Black Lives Matter LA has been messaging around the LA budget every year for years, since they began. And so this year, I think with COVID and everything, they were taking a closer look at it and saying that this city is spending 54% of its budget on policing. And that's just not where the money should go. We are seeing, if you go to Skid Row, if you go to pretty much any part of town, you're going to see encampments, you're going to see more tents, you're going to see people who are struggling to survive. And it's not, the stereotypical thing that everybody thinks about when they think about a homeless person. It's people of all ages, of all backgrounds who, right. I know a guy in Echo Park who was managing an apartment complex with his wife, and she died of cancer, and he couldn't deal with it. And so he became homeless. You're seeing all these people. And so the city will say that it wants to take care of people. It starts these initiatives to house more people. But the fact is we have more than 60,000 people on the street, and the Mayor Garcetti and the city council are dragging their feet. Everybody would rather just bow to the police because the police have such incredible, immense power here. The LAPD, roots run really deep here. People really love them. And when you have someone like Garcetti and the city council who just absolutely love cops, there is no way that they're ever going to give any money to anything but police. And police think that they can solve the homelessness crisis through policing, which we're seeing is not the case. We're seeing people be killed by police. We're seeing people be harassed. We're seeing city council members saying that they want to arm park rangers instead of actually pouring money into some, housing or some sort of even just regular services for unhoused people. They'd rather give guns to the people who have the most contact with unhoused people. And I think that's where we're at with that. Mayors all across the city, whether it's, Jacob Fry in Minneapolis or wherever, they would rather bow to the police machine and their unions right now than to actually help people. And I think that, that's the big fight right now. And our major victory is that we've had people talking about the budget in a way that they never have, regular ass people. So, right. We have to keep hammering them on that. And 54% is not acceptable to give to police when you have 3 people a day dying in Los Angeles, 3 unhoused people a day dying in Los Angeles.
And for 2028, are you anticipating, if all goes according to Garcetti's plan, a higher presence of LAPD, or is it going to be more private security for the games, or some mixture of the two?
Well, kind of a mixture. I mean, the cop presence is going to increase really dramatically, and I think I would argue that it already has. By LA 2028, the cops have already said they're going to need 30% more officers in order to operate. On top of that, the Olympics is something known as an NSSE, which is a National Security Special Event, and that's like any event big enough that to justify an increased security presence because of a possible terrorist threat. So that's not just things like the Olympics, but also things like the Super Bowl, or, the MLB All-Star Game, or any of these other big events. And what those NSSE designations mean is that local police and the federal government can directly collaborate on security. So any organization or institution in the Department of Homeland Security can now collaborate directly with LAPD. So that means that we're looking at increased militarization. We're looking at a presence of ICE and Border Patrol here that is, I think, really disturbing. And, we're already seeing it happen. Last fall in October, the Department of Homeland Security came here and did a talk with LAPD about preparing for 2028 in 2019, 9 years before the Olympics. So this type of ramping up of militarization, it's just going to be ongoing unless we stop the Olympics.
Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about Tokyo and how that plays into all of this? What's happening with the 2020 Tokyo Olympics? They were postponed, right?
Yeah, they're supposed to be going on in July of next year, and they're still going to be called, confusingly, the 2020 Tokyo Games. They're not changing. They refuse to change the name.
Hey, hindsight.
Right. Yeah. Right. So, but
think about how the 2 zeros in 2020 will look in an Olympic rings logo graphic design.
Yeah, you can't pass that up.
It's going to be beautiful. Honestly, it's so beautiful. But I think what happened with and this is what happened with Tokyo is very indicative of the way that the IOC operates. It was every other major sporting event had been canceled. The MLB season, the NBA season, everything was being canceled. Even bowling alleys were being closed, right? Because of COVID, and they were the last holdouts. They were saying July is by the time July comes, we'll be fine. We'll still be able to have 50,000 people in an arena. And it wasn't until a lot of countries started to withdraw their players and kind of criticize them for that they actually took action. And not only that, but in the lead up to the games, I mean, one of the torch relay was going to go through Fukushima, which is still recovering from the 2011 nuclear disaster. And even as late as 2019, there was still troubling amounts of radiation in that city. So, the IOC and the Japanese government, again, it's all about money and all that stuff. So they would rather put, athletes and people, the public in danger than actually admit, maybe we shouldn't do this. And again, if countries hadn't pulled out, the Tokyo 2020 Olympics would still be on the books and would be putting a ton of people at risk. And what we saw happen once the games were postponed is the coronavirus numbers in Japan started to spike because they were actively suppressing the number of cases to make it look like everything was fine. So it's crazy to me that they're even still considering doing it next year when they're saying that events like that probably shouldn't happen till 2022.
This is sort of a tangent, but I also heard that Shoko Asahara was executed specifically to prepare for the Olympics in Tokyo because they didn't want any sort of relics of Aum Shinrikyo hanging around to remind people of that as another terror attack.
Wait, they executed him recently?
Yeah, in 2018.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
I entirely missed that.
Anyway,
interesting.
But
go ahead.
Well, you guys mentioned the environmental impact of the games, and I'm picturing 2028, and it seems like climate change will have gotten to such a point where maybe the purpose of the Olympic Games will be to like contest different resources. So you're going to have like countries going at each other to see who gets a bigger like oil supply or whatever. But what are some of the environmental impacts that we're going to see next summer and then 8 years from now, potentially?
Do you remember a few years ago, or maybe 10 or 20 years ago, maybe I'm old, when the logo for the Olympics was just that weird little blue alien monster thing with like rings for eyes and shit? That's because of the radiation. He actually is a real thing. I'm just lying. I don't know. But go ahead. Go on.
Yeah, sorry. So as far as environmental, I mean, if we're going to talk about that, I just want a little bit of context as far as like environmental degradation that happens because of the Olympics. I mean, Rio had, up in the run up to the 2016 Olympics, their waterways were incredibly polluted. They still are. And one of the things that the Olympics promised to do was to build, 8 water treatment plants along these waterways that were going to host swimmers and rowers and all that sort of stuff. And they built one. And each consecutive Olympics basically says, oh, we're going to be greener than the last one. We're going to do all these great environmental things. And what they do is they go to Pyeongchang and down 58,000 trees to make room for a ski slope. And now that ski slope sits there empty and rotting while those trees, they're saying, oh, yeah, by the way, we're going to replant double those trees and it's going to be great. And they've planted a few thousand. So we have seen it over and over and over again. And what's going to happen in 2028, who knows what the world will be like then. I mean, if it keeps going this way, it's going to be really, really troubling. But even in 2020, I mean, they had to switch around some of the events because Tokyo was going to be way, way too hot for people to be running like marathons or whatever. So I just think that, whatever's going to happen in LA 2028 is going to be, they're going to try to spin it some way and say that things are going to be fine. But behind the scenes, like, it's just going to cause this city more damage. And I mean, this city after LA 84 was completely scarred and completely changed, and not only from policing, but just the landscape of the actual city. And that's something that the Olympics come for 2 or 3 weeks, they bounce, and then we're kind of all left to, Rio is left to have a bunch of its people displaced. Beijing, all these places are left to like pick up the pieces and be missing parts of their environment and something that people hold sacred in a lot of cases, and all in the name of sport or, prestige or whatever. It's bullshit.
Yeah.
Sorry, I kind of went on a tangent there, but
No, totally.
I think one of the things about Tokyo 2020/1 that we've been talking about too is, although like we absolutely have to cancel it, it has to be canceled. Much of the damage is already done. Like a lot of the negative consequences of the Olympics happen because of like displacement and policing in the run up to it. So, all we can really do now is cancel it so that like the incredible theft of, taxpayer money stops and, some of this stuff slows down.
Or, what we could do is keep having it until it's not possible to have the Winter Olympics anymore because we've destroyed the environment so much by doing the Summer Olympics. And then maybe we continue the process until it's not possible to have the Olympics at all because the world is like a flaming magma ball. They would probably just invent new games. My plan's not going to work.
Yeah, they'll do like magma skiing or some shit. They'll find a way.
Yeah.
They'll find a way.
The whole Olympics will just be that floor is lava.
There you go. That's why they introduced it onto Netflix, is to get us used to the idea.
That's right. That's manufactured consent, baby.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned the budget, and I've heard that like the estimate never turns out to be. They're always over budget, right? Like basically every games costs way more than they say it will. And who ends up usually footing that bill? Is it the committee or is it the people in these cities?
It is always the people in the cities. The one exception, interestingly, is LA 84, the 1984 Olympics. That Olympics is hailed as like LA made a profit, so we should definitely do 2028 again. But the reality of it is that it was like $200 million some odd dollars after the IOC took its cut. There was like $93 million left, and that all went to like a nonprofit. It did not go to the city. So a nonprofit, by the way, nonprofit that was founded to accept that money, called the LA 84 Foundation, and that now invests in Blackstone. So any profit is not going back to the people. Then the other side of your question, the other thing about LA 84 is Los Angeles specifically passed a measure prohibiting like public funds to be used for any budget overages for the Olympics. So cities in the past have like passed certain things like that to make sure they're not on the hook for it, but that's certainly not the case for LA 2028, and it has not been the case for most of these bids in recent memory, because part of the success, quote unquote, of the Olympics is contingent on basically being like able to pillage from public money and taxpayer resources and just like hoover up all of those funds, basically, which could be used for literally anything else.
Right. And I'm curious now about in Japan, has there been like a lot of organizing against the games in Tokyo? What's the situation been there over the past few years?
Yeah, there's been a good amount of organizing, and actually, I think this is before I joined the coalition and Annie as well. They a bunch of I think about a dozen of our organizers went to Japan. It was like in July of 2019, so a year out of from the 2020 games, and they marched with the protesters there, had teach-ins, and that's something with Nolympics is we are very devoted to our transnational, solidarity. So not only do we want them out of LA, we just don't want them to be anywhere. We don't want to push the games away from us and send them to another city for them to deal with. So, right. We're in touch with people from Tokyo. We just had a teach-in a few weeks ago with some of the organizers there. One person who's twice been displaced because of the games. And so we have, we're in touch with people from France and we know people in Boston, because Boston was able to force the games out a few years ago. So we take the transnational stuff pretty seriously, because our one of our slogans is "NOlympics anywhere." We don't want them here. We don't want them anywhere. We want to destroy them. We don't want them to be in one city every 4 years or whatever. We want them gone because they have caused so much fucking damage over the years, and so there's always been a healthy Olympic resistance, and I think Japan has some of the best people out there, resisting them at any chance they get.
Well, so if the goal is,
sorry,
I just out of curiosity, if the goal is just to completely end the Olympics, I guess my question is how? Like, is it just by raising enough awareness in every city they could possibly be marketing the Olympics to create resistance?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting question, and I think a very good one. I think one of the beautiful things about the transnational anti-Olympics movement is it's sort of like very similar to a transnational anti-capitalism movement, because essentially, like, what we're trying to fight when we fight the Olympics is the crises created by capitalism that the Olympics like massively exacerbates. So I think, it's just like the global fight we're all in against this like horrible, crushing, dehumanizing system, that we just all have to exercise solidarity with each other as like an international proletariat and push this shit out. And I think it's funny because Olympics boosters really like to talk about how the Olympics like bring everyone in the world together for like world peace. Right. And what we really know is that the Olympics sow divisions, and extract and exploit. But I think what we're witnessing right now with the worldwide No Olympics Anywhere movement is that people are really realizing that they can unite, and what they can unite against is against capitalism and against the Olympics. And what really brings us together is the struggle against these systems.
I'm starting to realize how indoctrinated I was by a film called Cool Runnings that came out in the early 90s. I hate German people, and what have they ever done? But the villains of that movie, it really made me hate them, and it made me support these Jamaican guys. I don't know why. No, but you're right. The enemy here is just the Olympics itself and it being a byproduct of global capitalism. So I guess that's a big question, and therefore it has a big answer. That makes sense.
But I think part of, I don't know, what is so great, too, about Nolympics is we're pushing against all of these destructive forces of capitalism and we're trying to end them. But we're also doing this work to, like, imagine the world that we want to fight for and move towards. You know, we're imagining police abolition and the abolition of the prison industrial complex. We want to decommodify housing, and it's a human right, and really make good on that. You know, we want to take back our public spaces that have been privatized by these mega sports and by private interests across the world. You know, and just feel like just a little dose of that revolutionary optimism to feel good about, you know, where we're going to.
I mean, I feel so good about this movement because I think I didn't like the Olympics to begin with, but it didn't occur to me that there's actually good reason to be against this. Now it all makes sense to me. I don't think they're cool. I think they're weird, and they're for nerds to feel like they can enjoy sports without the crude, you know, prolish nature of American football, shit like that, which is also bad. I say, yeah, we get rid of them. We do away with them. Here's a question, though. Let's get a little weird. What do sports look like after this? You know, how do we enjoy sports in a post-revolution world?
I mean, I think one of the greatest things that the Olympics says they've been able to do is convince people that they're needed, right? That, like, there has to be this prestige attached to sports, that there has to be this big show. And you know, listen, I mean, we all gather around and watch the Super Bowl, and I watch the World Cup. I don't like soccer, but I understand why people would want to, you know, feel a part of something. But I think that we can enjoy sports. We can enjoy having people who we look up to. You know, kids can grow up, you know, admiring sports stars. I mean, I did, you know, I grew up in the era of not only Jordan, but Kobe and Shaq. And so I get that. I get that as someone who loves sports and wanted to do that. But what we need to do is, like, realize that it shouldn't come at the price of people's lives, of people's livelihoods. And as far as what sports looks like, I mean, you can still have a lot of the shit that you're doing right now. I mean, the you know, MLB stadiums are built. Like, you can keep doing that. We just don't need anything new. We don't need to keep pressing on and changing the landscapes of cities in the name of that. I think it's fine as it is. And I mean, shit, sports has already enough problems as it is. Every fucking league is, like, mired in some sort of controversy. But I think that we need to remove that thought from our heads that somehow, if the Olympics are gone, that, you know, that sports will lose anything. It won't. I don't believe it will. And I think that we need to start thinking of, like, a way to actually make sports for everyone, right? Not just because, like, right. If you think about it, like, the Olympics are going to come to whatever city, and most of the people who live there are not going to be able to afford to go watch them. These games are incredibly expensive. They are, everything about the Olympics is for the elites, right? So if you want to go watch, hey, I really love soccer, I'd love to go watch a game in the Olympics, it's going to cost you a lot of fucking money. So we need to do away with that. And I think there is a world in which we can actually rebuild, you know, the love of sport and have people meet in solidarity of sport. But the Olympics is not the way. It won't work anymore. It's caused too much pain.
I bring this up because I think I have some. To me, in my mind, you know, the worlds of, like, popular art forms and sports and entertainment, all these things kind of exist in a similar space in the question of capitalism. And I'm often asked by people, like, you know, what would comedy look like? You know, I do fucking stand up, and what would that look like post you know, this revolution or whatever the hell you're talking about? And I think it's interesting because, you know, I think the part of the reason that we have, like, this system of stars and stuff like that, and it being a spectacle and entertainment and it being somewhat competitive is I don't know, it's a byproduct of the capitalist system itself. And, you know, to me, I always think if we were to actually achieve some sort of utopia, you'd still be able to do stand-up, for instance, if you're a stand-up comedian or something like that. But
not in my utopia.
Yeah, fair.
Speak for yourself.
But it wouldn't. In my mind, it wouldn't be attached to capital. Like you wouldn't have to do it as a job. Right. Your needs would be taken care of to such an extent that you could just do things for pure enjoyment and for the sake of themselves. And I think sports probably, at least in my mind, in my model of this utopia, would fit into the same thing. Like we could still have plenty of competition. We might not have, though, like high level dramatic arcs with, particular figures that are at the high level of like the NBA or something like that. I don't know. That might be the trade-off. But then again, maybe you would, because music, for example, became very much democratized just because of the internet. It used to be every person in your high school liked the same band and they were the coolest band ever. And then, Guns N' Roses is like an example of a band like that, right? And then, file sharing happens on the internet, and against the will of the industry of music itself, everything's way more democratized. And now I think we live in a much cooler society where there's lots and lots and lots and lots of music, and music is a thing that you just go kind of dive into, and everyone knows about, their own secret thing that they found that no one else does or whatever. So I don't know. Maybe, maybe that's it. Maybe that post-revolutionary sporting is, there's more of it, but less of the high production star power stuff,
Yeah, there's also, if you look back in history, there have been attempts to do, other like Olympic alternatives. There was like, the Socialist worker games movement, that lasted for a little bit. So there are ways to do it. And I think that, just competition itself is something that's always going to draw people, and people will write the narratives for that. I don't think you need necessarily need like a league or something to do that. I mean, and again, I grew up watching this stuff and being like, oh, what's going on? Like reading about the drama in a locker room, and that stuff is fun or whatever. But like, again, we can have all of these things. We can have it all, baby. We just have to make sure that it doesn't fucking hurt anybody. That's ultimately what it comes down to. Because I'm down to like, I love playing sports. If I ever meet the two of you, I'd love to ball you up in basketball. I just think it's like you would destroy me.
I would love to see anyone play basketball against Anders Lee. Myself either. I'm not good.
I was
either,
not a bad baller back in the day. I think I averaged 12 baskets one season.
Are you tall, Anders?
I'm technically 5'11", but I identify as 6 feet.
Me too. Yeah, hell yeah.
I imagine
just like everyone I matched with on Tinder in like 2015.
Yeah. I imagine Anders is the guy with the wraparound goggles that takes the gear really seriously. I don't know why. Elbow in the face. All right. Well, I think we should probably round this out and get out of here, because it is, the unnamed, unspecified hot dog celebration holiday.
It's Explosion Day.
Right, that's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, just like, we can have sports without the Olympics, we can have fireworks without nationalism.
That's true.
I mean, it's been going on for the last 3 weeks in my neighborhood, so, it's another day.
There you go.
Well, I guess let my listeners know where they can find out more about NOlympics, how they can support, all that stuff.
Well, we're on all the socials at NOlympics. Is that right, actually, Albert, or is it NOlympicsLA? Now I have to fact check myself. So let's start this over.
Listen, it's all at NOlympics. NOlympicsLA.com. We've got so many great videos that tie all this stuff together. I mean, we could have hours and hours worth of conversation to like explain to you why everything is bad, but we have a lot of videos. We do seriously good tweets. We do stuff on Instagram. We got a lot of other stuff coming that's in the works right now. Because of COVID and because everyone's aware of stuff now, like the movement is building. So we want to just, engage people. I'm one of the new member liaisons. So you want to come and fuck with us, like hit me up, and I'm on Twitter. Just hit us all up, and we're out there. There's many ways to get involved right now. We have so much shit going on.
Truly, right. Just go to the website, come to a meeting. We are super welcoming, and we would love to have you.
All right, right on. Well, yeah, thank you very much, and I think that should be it. Anybody else? Anders, anything?
That's it. Yeah. No Olympics.
All right.
Stop them.
Cancel them.
Canceled.
Go blow some shit up.